Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. Our mission today is laser-focused, really. We are unpacking the source material, analyzing the absolute, high-stakes impact of the first weekend of November internationals. That's dated November 2nd, 2025, on the World Rugby Rankings.
And if you're following the road to the next World Cup, you know these results aren't just sort of temporary bragging rights. This is vital because the 2027 Rugby World Cup draw that's taking place early next month and the standings, well, they directly dictate those critical seedings. You want an easier run, to the knockout stages. Every point, every tiny fraction of a point matters right now.
Absolutely. You could feel the tension, couldn't you? We saw some pretty significant victories across the Northern Hemisphere. England got the win over Australia. New Zealand pulled off a massive, really tense victory against Ireland. South Africa absolutely dominated Japan. And Scotland swept the USA aside. 4 big wins, but interestingly, only a couple actually translated into meaningful ranking shifts. Now, before we really dive into the fascinating maths of how those points shuffle the deck globally, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you love getting into the strategy and the numbers behind the game, subscribe to Rugby Obsession. We do this kind of deep dive all the time, continuous insight and analysis. Okay, let's unpack this then. If you look purely at the ranking movement, the biggest headline has to be England. England moving ahead of France. It wasn't like a huge points haul, was it? But it felt like a perfect, calculated, strategic move.
Oh, absolutely. It was surgically precise, you could say. England earned exactly 0.40 points, just that, from their 25-7 victory over Australia down at Allianz Stadium. And when you're looking at the top 4, those decimal points, they're like gold dust. They just nudged France out of that 4th position. What's, really fascinating here is understanding the huge significance of that tiny, tiny movement.
That's the real story, isn't it? Why does moving from 5th to 4th matter so much right now?
Well, it basically defines the potential pathway to the World Cup final. The draw for the pool stages, it typically places the top 4 ranked teams into different pools. That makes sure, theoretically, that the 4 highest ranked teams can't possibly meet until the semis, assuming, they all top their groups. So by grabbing that 4th spot, England massively reduces its chances of ending up in a horrible pool of death, alongside maybe the current number 1, South Africa, and another top team like New Zealand or Ireland. It's all about trying to engineer an easier path to the quarterfinals.
Right. And while England are celebrating getting that strategic edge, the immediate fallout for Australia, the World Cup hosts, remember, is, pretty grim. They lost that matching 0.40 rating points, and now they're really losing ground on Argentina. The Wallabies are, 0.92 points behind the Pumas in 6th place now. They could be looking at a really tough draw if things don't change fast before next month.
Yeah, and if we just zoom out a bit and look at the new landscape, as of November 2nd, the top 5 is incredibly tight. South Africa still number 1, New Zealand 2nd, Ireland holding 3rd. But the crucial change is England now holding 4th with 88.04 points. That reflects the 0.40 game, obviously. And France, they drop 1 spot to 5th, and they're separated by only 0.22 points. That tiny 0.40 swing just completely redefined that top 4 structure.
Which, brings us to what I think is maybe the biggest head-scratcher of the whole weekend. Let's talk about those teams who put massive scores on the board, but saw their points tally stay exactly the same. It really shows how counterintuitive the ranking system can sometimes be.
It is a fascinating contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
You had the Springboks, delivering a monumental 61-7 thrashing of Japan at Wembley, 9 tries to 1. Then you had Scotland just hammering the USA 85-0 up at Murrayfield. These are huge wins, great for morale, obviously, but neither team earned any ranking points at all for their efforts.
Hold on. So New Zealand gets almost a full point, 0.98, for beating Ireland by 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
But South Africa gets absolutely nothing for scoring 61 points against Japan. That sounds, fundamentally a bit unfair maybe, especially for teams who dominate against non-tier 1 sides. Does that mean these high-scoring games against lower-ranked teams are basically irrelevant for World Cup seeding?
From a pure ranking points perspective, yes, pretty much. Here's where we need to sort of simplify the mechanics behind it. It all comes down to expectation, really, and the ranking differential that already exists between the teams. Think of it, maybe, like boxing. If the world heavyweight champ fights a lightweight, they gain 0 recognition, no credit for winning, doesn't matter how fast the knockout is.
Ah, okay, that's a perfect analogy. Makes sense.
Exactly. The system is designed to reward victory, sure, but it especially rewards victory against a comparable opponent or, an underdog beating a favorite. So in the South Africa versus Japan case, the points difference between them was already huge, specifically 18.95 points before kickoff. The system basically said, look, we expected you to win by about this much, maybe even more so, no bonus points for you. In fact, if Japan had only lost by, say, 10 points, the Springboks would have actually lost ranking points. It shows how unforgiving that rule can be. And the same massive differential rule applied to Scotland versus the USA.
Wow, okay, that really puts the All Blacks' gain into perspective then. Much more crucial. New Zealand earned that vital .98 points from their 26-13 win over Ireland in Chicago, precisely because Ireland is seen as a comparable top-tier opponent.
They absolutely did, and that .98 points was so important because it widened the gap between them, New Zealand, and Ireland, who were in third. Their current buffer, sitting there in second place, is 2.15 points.
And talk about fine margins. This is where the source material gets really specific and, frankly, quite surprising.
Yeah.
That 2.15 point buffer, right? It would have been 3.13 points, a whole point more.
Yeah.
If Lester Fainga'anuku's last-minute try hadn't been ruled out, remember, for a forward pass. Oh, I remember. That single ruling on a pass right at the death in the 80th minute, it actually affected the overall World Cup seeding picture by nearly a full ranking point. It just highlights how a referee's split-second call can literally change the landscape for the World Cup draw.
Absolutely. The tiniest detail dictates the macro future,
Yeah.
Structurally, despite 4 major teams celebrating wins, the only team that actually improved their ranking position this weekend was England, grabbing that vital 4th slot for the draw.
But the drama isn't over, is it? It continues immediately. France, who dropped to 5th, they've got a massive opportunity to jump straight back up, maybe even into the top 3 when they host the current number 1, the Springboks. That's at the Stade de France next weekend. That match is absolutely critical now for the rankings, isn't it?
Oh, that game is seismic.
Yeah.
And not just because of the ranking points up for grabs, huge as they are, it's also about the whole strategic mindset involved. This isn't just about turning up and playing well on the day. We saw a related article suggesting Rugby Australia really needs to take some serious lessons from how the Springboks and Rassie Erasmus operate. It's about a highly technical, almost data-obsessed approach to every single aspect of the game, including managing selection and performance specifically to maximize points against the right opponents.
Yeah, that focus on strategic operation really underlines the whole rugby ecosystem that feeds into these rankings. It's not just about the test matches themselves, is it? The sources mentioned the incredible depth of talent coming through the global club systems. You've got the Premiership in England, the URC, the United Rugby Championship with massive sides like Leinster, Munster, the South African teams now.
Yep.
And, of course, Super Rugby down south with teams like the Crusaders, the Hurricanes, and so on.
And that feeds directly into international ranking performance. It has to. When sources track player form, they're looking at, how a key fly half performs under pressure in a tense Premiership final, or how a forward dominates the set piece week in, week out in the URC. That consistent domestic performance is what validates those huge differential points we were talking about earlier. If a player from, say, the Crusaders brings that dominance onto the international stage, well, they contribute to those precious points gains against comparable rivals.
It really shows that rugby success at the top level is this whole global network of strategic performance, not just, a few isolated test matches here and there. Okay, before we wrap up with our final thoughts, let us know what you think. Head over to our social media channels and definitely subscribe to Rugby Obsession if you haven't already. We really want to know, who do you reckon is the current standout for World Rugby Player of the Year? It feels like a tough call this year.
It is.
Especially since Victor Manfield is apparently on the selection committee. Interesting choice. We want your opinions.
So yeah, to sort of pull it all together, while loads of teams celebrated big scores this weekend, the biggest strategic win, that was undoubtedly England. Nailing down that 4th spot right before the World Cup draw, guaranteeing themselves a better path, potentially, in 2027, it just reinforces the complexity of actually earning points. The biggest margins on the scoreboard, especially against lower-ranked teams, sometimes give you the smallest reward in the rankings. The system really rewards beating your peers.
And that's actually the perfect concluding thought, isn't it? Because if those marginal point gains against your direct rivals are so incredibly valuable, if, like we saw, a single forward pass call can cost almost a full ranking point.
Well, how much pressure does that put on these final few matches of the Autumn Nations Series? Our sources mentioned an article about 11 players who matter most in this year's Autumn Nations Series, and knowing that every single moment could be critical for their nation's seeding. Well, those remaining games are absolute must-watch theatre now. If you're passionate about the strategies, the numbers, the nitty-gritty behind the game, please make sure you subscribe to Rugby Obsession. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we will look forward to you listening to our next episode.